Okay, so I'm going to walk you all through the process of getting your model ready to print on the MakerBot 3D printer. So first off, we're gonna look at a couple of basic models here and how to prep these and how to sort of think about how these are going to print. Okay. So we have two things here. Let's say these were your initials and you wanted to print these two letters, right? So first, the way this T is standing is not going to print very easily because the wings here are not going to print on open air, right? Like it'll print upward up the base. Then when it gets to here and starts trying to print, the layer that hangs out over the edge here, it's just going to fall to the ground, right? MakerBot by default will, if you check it, will print supports to hold that up if you have to print it this way. But the better option is just to not print it that way, to print it laying down its back, right? And that way everything can just print straight up and you don't get any issues. Now, any change of angle that is more than 45 degrees, it's going to have an issue with. Now this, it may actually be able to print standing like this. It's still probably, you're going to increase your likelihood of having a mistake this way, because what's going to happen is it's going to print one layer and then it's going to offset that layer just a little bit. And as long as it doesn't have to offset it more than a 45-degree angle, then you should be okay. But still, the smart move would just be to print it on its back, because you know that there's not going to be any issues with it that way. Okay? So once we have these models, the first thing you may end up running into, you'll see here that this face is just one giant, like 50-sided face, and just like every other program or every other person who is a competent modeler, that is MakerBot just doesn't like that. And so we're going to have to slice this up, and we can manually do that. We can manually slice this into quads, or you could, or we can run a triangulation on this. So you can also eventually get that to quads if you want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to mesh and triangulate, and yeah, it gets ugly. But then if we wanted to go back and do the quadrangulate, it's going to make it slightly less ugly. Still not pretty, but less ugly. Either way, it doesn't matter as long as the mesh still looks the same, because all that really matters is that the MakerBot is wanting triangles. So if I have this selected, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export this out to the MakerBot program, or it's MakerBot desktop, and you have to download that from the internet every time you want to use this. If you're using it on the lab computers, you may just want to keep a copy of it with you so you can just install it every time you sit down. And I think eventually it'll end up just being part of the lab software. But MakerBot desktop will accept two different types of files, or accept a couple of different kinds of files, but one is the STL file, but the one that works best is OBJ, at least coming out of Maya. So you may or may not have your OBJ plugin turned on. So under Plugin Manager, we're going to go see if it's turned on in here, and OBJ export right there, .mll, that just needs to be loaded. So once you have that, select the files you want to export, and you'll realize I'm leaving these standing up. That's not because that's how I want it. It's more so I can show you some stuff later. So we go File, Export Selection, and I'm just going to kick this out to my desktop. I think I have a print folder in here somewhere. Let's just print it to the desktop then. Or we'll go ahead and make a folder really quick, and we'll call it prints. And we'll call this tfly. So you see we're exporting out as an OBJ, export selection. And now we're going to go ahead and minimize this and start looking at what we have. So if I go File, we're going to go to desktop. This is the program that you would download to interpret this this model for the printer. So I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. It's asking me if I want the newer version. Right now I don't want to deal with that, so hit continue, and really now we just need to, it will load up the virtual version of our printer. Okay, now we have the replicator Z18, and so if it's showing something different, you may have to go in here and select your type of device that you want, but it's the replicator Z18. That's what we're going to be printing with here. So when you're ready, we're going to go File, and we're going to say Open, and we're going to go look for that file we just exported. So under Prints, TY Object, hit Open. So I wasn't paying any attention to the size when I created this, but you may want to work back and forth with your scale to get it to a very specific scale. Right now it's bringing it in as really tiny, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell it to rescale it. Okay, and you'll see that even though I had it pointing up and down earlier, it brought it in on its back, and that's good, because this is how we really would have wanted to print it, right? Now that's because in Maya is I think it's a ZF world, is that correct? YF world, and MakerBot Desktop is a ZF world. So the thing we'll recognize first is that we have this in here, and we need to make sure that this is positioned the way we want it to be, in the right scale that we want it to be, because it just automatically scaled it up for us. Let's say this is too big. I can go in here and click my scale option. I'm going to click uniform scaling, and sometimes that doesn't work. But this will allow us to, or it's like the check mark doesn't work. It's actually still uniformly scaling it, I believe. Nope, I'm wrong. Okay, so if that's not working, I'm going to reset my scale, click uniform scaling again, and now it should uniformly scale it up. Okay. Now this is going to be in millimeters, and so let's say I wanted this to be 43 or 42.5 millimeters tall and 78.2 millimeters wide overall. Okay. Now once we get that, I'm going to look at a couple of other things. We could rotate. If this would have came in the wrong angle, we could always rotate it with these 90-degree options. And there's also a button here called Lay Flat, and that's going to make sure that it's touching in as many points as it can on the surface of this. And then under our Move tool, I'm going to make sure it's on the platform, and usually I like to make sure it's centered. That's just sort of out of an OCD tendency of mine. So let's say this is what we want. Let's say this is the size, the scale, and everything we want. Now we have to start trying to see if how long our print is going to take. Okay, so we'll look in here in our settings, and you'll see that we have some options on the details here. So we can have the low resolution. If we did that, it's going to have a 10% infill, and that means the area inside of the model, it's going to print a shell all the way around it, but rather than fill the entire thing up with plastic, it will create like a honeycomb crisscross material inside of it for support. And this will tell you how much of that you want it to be. If you set this to 100, it would print the entire object as solid plastic. The number of shells, that's how many shells it's going to print around it, so making it either thinner or thicker. And the layer height, that's how thick the filament will extrude out of the tip of the printer. Okay, and so by default, this is the settings for low. It's going to be 0.3 millimeters, right? If I click on standard, you'll see that the infill stays the same, I think, but the layer height gets a little smaller. And if we go to high, you get a little bit more infill, and the layer height gets smaller as well. I usually check on rafts and supports. Rafts are going to be an object that it prints underneath it to keep it from sticking to the platform, and supports are going to hold up any overhanging areas. The supports are kind of hard to chisel off there, so keep that in mind. But once we get this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say low for right now just to show you. So if I hit save settings, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go print this. We have we're going to, at least at the beginning, sort of limit everybody to an 8-hour print. Okay, so let's say I go File. If I hit Save As, this is going to save the MakerBot desktop file, so I can just go back and make changes to it. And it's going to save it as a .thing file. Okay, and that means you can open it back up and make changes to it if you want to print a different size or different shape or whatever, or the print doesn't work correctly. So go ahead and save that. But to actually send this to the printer, we need to create a .makerbot file. And so for that, we go File, Export, and you're going to see it generates that, and it tells us here our print time is about 0 hours and 18 minutes. Okay. Now we go to our print preview, and you'll see an example of kind of what that print is going to look like. You can also even see the process of how it's going to print it. You'll see that it's going to print the platform first. It's going to start building up. It's going to put the honeycomb inside it, and then it's going to cap it off at the top. Okay. So 18 minutes, that's not bad. And if you click this Show Travel Moves, you'll see that what actually is exporting is the path that the MakerBot is going to make when it prints this. Okay. So just 18 minutes, I got some more time I could spare, if I want more detail with that. So I'm just going to hit Cancel instead of Export, and I'm going to go back to my settings. I'm going to set that to High. And so if I hit Save Settings and we do this export again, you're going to see now my print is going to take 43 minutes instead of 18 minutes. And so let's say I'm alright with that. I'm going to hit Export Now. I'm going to put this in my Prints folder. No. What just happened? There we go. Prints. And I'll call this TY1. And I want to hit Save. Okay, so that file that I just saved, this prints folder, this ty1.makerbot, this is the file that you will need to give the student workers so they can print it for you. And so basically, you will submit that to a folder up on the network, and you will sign in to let them know that you're interested in having this printed, and they will take this file and they'll plug it into the printer and they'll print it for you. And so as long as your time limit that you saw is under 8 hours, they'll print it. Hopefully it'll come out great and you can pick it up later. If it's over 8 hours, they're just going to cancel the print and say, never mind, we'll do the next person in line. So this is up to you. Like if your print comes out at 8.5 hours, you have to decide: do you want to make it a little smaller? Do you want to make it a little lower resolution? What is your compromise to get it under that 8-hour print? And that's just so the printer is not always tied up by 1 or 2 people who just want to make a gigantic print of everything. So hopefully that makes sense. We'll also be writing up a document about this to kind of show you a step-by-step on that, and let me know if you have any questions. I'll talk to you soon.